Supergirl should be a disaster. It is a messy, cut-up corporate product that fights its source material, suffers a total third-act CGI collapse, and yet it was a thoroughly fun time at the theater. This movie struggles because of four specific filmmaking decisions and a bizarre phenomenon that Thor 2 and Supergirl have in common, and somehow it saves the entire thing from disaster. The movie basically speedruns the backstory of every character except Supergirl. I think you could say screenwriting runs on the strict economy of emotional currency. What I mean by that is if you don't spend the time fleshing out these characters in the first act, then you won't get an emotional reaction out of the audience in the third act. Supergirl starts with a fundamentally stressed narrative. The first 20 minutes operate at a very fast pace, treating vital character building like a checklist. The editing is in a massive hurry to establish the antagonist, introduce the central companion dynamic with Ruthie, and solidify Kara's friendship with Krypto the Superdog. Because the film refuses to pause and let these bonds form organically, the characters initially just feel underdeveloped. That creates an unearned shift in the second half. When the plot dials the seriousness up to 11 and tries to deliver a payoff, it just doesn't work. The structural foundation isn't there to support that emotional weight. Before we look at the visual identity crisis, if you want more breakdowns of me analyzing modern cinema, a quick subscribe helps the channel out a lot. Now, let's talk about the texture of this universe. The second problem is a bizarre visual contradiction between physical production and post-production. In a cinematic landscape oversaturated with weightless green screen effects, Supergirl actually makes a brilliant decision by utilizing real practical creature effects. Seeing real alien designs on set completely changes the texture of the film, and it successfully invokes this lived-in analog aesthetic of the first Star Wars movie. Which makes the post-production color grade choice a very questionable one. Because on the color side of things, this movie reminded me of Solo: A Star Wars Story, and you don't want that. The entire color palette is just heavily desaturated, muddy, and flat. And right when the story demands the most atmosphere and emotional weight, a clinical gray studio grade just strips away any potential for emotions to happen. Now, the third issue is a noticeable disconnect between the film's imagery and its audio track. While the orchestral score does a good job, I have to say I like the score, the needle drops just don't feel really good. I did like them in the first half, but in the second half they just feel incredibly jarring. Music in cinema is supposed to amplify the feeling of a certain scene. But when Supergirl shifts into a more serious tone, the editing forces the same upbeat needle drops that we saw in the beginning of the movie where Kara was drunk or was trying to sleep. It feels like the studio just tried to push in some personality into this very boring ending that we get. But by doing that, it just disrupts any atmosphere that was left by that ending. So you don't have any chance to connect emotionally to what's happening on screen. And nowhere is this corporate plotting more obvious than with Jason Momoa's Lobo. Look, Momoa is perfectly cast, but plot-wise he has zero relevance. He is relegated to delivering forgettable one-liners or reactions between scenes. He isn't a character in this movie, he's just a marketing asset that they could put in the trailer. That doesn't mean I didn't like him in the movie, but he just distracts from the central journey of our two leads. But even with a rushed structure, a muted palette, clashing music, and a wasted Lobo, there is still one critical variable that saves the entire movie from falling apart. It is a phenomenon I call the Thor 2 paradox. Thor: The Dark World is a structurally messy, visually drab movie, yet it remains a pretty fun film due to the undeniable charisma and screen presence of its two lead actors. Supergirl lands exactly into that territory, and it works entirely because of Milly Alcock. She completely carries this entire multi-million-dollar film on her back. Her interpretation of Kara Zor-El is magnetic and effortlessly charming. If her performance didn't land, Supergirl would be one of the most frustrating and worst blockbusters of this year. Supergirl lands a 3 out of 5 for me. It looks and feels like a cut-up studio product that chose the safety of a generic formula over a distinct directorial style. But thanks to its practical effects, a powerhouse performance, and some story elements that are actually really good, this movie is a genuinely good time. I mean, the structural issues and the bland story are very common for modern blockbusters, but they didn't take away from the fun I had with Alcock's performance. Now, if you want to understand how a legendary director ran into an even worse visual disaster this season, click right here to watch my analysis on Steven Spielberg's Disclosure Day. And I'll explain to you why everyone thinks this movie looks so fake. And if you're one of the 5 people who went to watch Supergirl, then please comment down below if you liked it or if you didn't like it. I'd be interested. Okay, bye.